I'll turn the meeting over to our chairman, Islam.
Shalom, shalom, shalom. First, I rise to my highest heights, giving all praises due to Allah. I give honors to all true and divine prophets, including Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, Confucius, and the prophet in his days and times. Our prophet, Noble Ali. I extend those honors to him, the reverence in all those forms, and all my sheikhs, sheikesses throughout the United States. My name is Sheikh m.s.t.of, Chairman. Peace. So today, I wanted to go into a demonstration on a particular subject that I think doesn't really get a lot of focus in the Moorish movement, but we see a lot of evidence that this is an area of study and application for Moorish Americans. There's a proverb that goes something like this: a fool in his wealth, or a fool in I guess we'll use the word wealth. A fool in his wealth will soon part. And the essence of that statement is this: that if you don't understand what to do with money, somebody gonna get you for it, or you're gonna spend it and not have it anymore. Right? So Sheikh Muhammad, him and I discussed this beforehand, and he was able to pull up, by my request, he pulled up a lot of writings of the Prophet Ali that's relative to this demonstration. So we have in our additional laws, we have reference to what I'm talking about. So let's see what the Prophet says about the subject matter. Then we're gonna break down the words that the Prophet used and how they correlate to what we should be doing. I'm gonna use this practically, and then we're gonna tie it all in together. So can I get from the Quran, from the additional laws, can I get Act 1? Can I get a reader for that?
Islam. Additional laws, Act 1. Grand sheikhs and governors and heads of all temples, all businesses. Each said temple.
Wait, stop right. Hold up. Wait, right there. So it says grand sheikhs and governors. So these are two titles that the Prophet Noble Ali bestowed upon certain members, and he created offices, these offices. And so the offices of the Grand Sheikh, who we know our Grand Sheikh is m.s.t.of here in Brooklyn, for our temple, Moorish Temple America Inc. 21-3, right? And then we have governors. And then it says, and so here's another included in this law, in the heads of all temples, comma, all businesses. So you got the Grand Sheikhs mentioned in this clause, you have the governors mentioned in the clause, you had the heads of temples mentioned in the clause, but the very last, it says all businesses. But that comma represents heads of all businesses. Okay? So there is an industrious component right there. It's presumed that we would have businesses. Not only is it the reason why it was presumed, because during the time of the Prophet, Moors had businesses. And their businesses was relative to the movement. Each said temple, I'm sorry, I'm not reading it. I'm sorry. Sheikh Sadiq, may you please continue?
Each said temple must be approved by the Prophet Noble Ali. Before acting upon by any members, let it be finance, property, or any line of life that will cause the members to sacrifice, finance, etc.
That will stop right there. That's good. So here we go. That all of this, or should I say, I'll be very specific to language. Each said temple must be approved by the Prophet Noble Ali. Well, we know he physically transitioned into another form. So in what ways, I want to just, this is a little bit off of the demonstration, but in what ways could a temple be approved by Prophet Noble Ali if he's not here in the physical form? I want to open that question to the floor for more to take a stab at that. and see what we could, we could make knowledge born on that part.
Grand body or the heads of your temples.
It's long. And exactly, Sheik. But and what? How do we know that they approved by the Prophet Noble Dwali? How? It sounds like it's something that he has to do. How was he able to do it? Like I said, you got it right there.
Mm-hmm.
It is the grand body. It is the grand sheiks. But there's an element that we know that they confirm. And so, how do we know that? It's because they live in accordance of the rules, usages, and laws of the Moorish Science Temple of America. That's all that's approved by the Prophet Noble Ali. Is what law that he left and laid behind. Now, additional degree to that is when you dealing with our particular lineage and how we deal with the transfer of the power of the prophets and how men could wear the title Prophet Noble Ali, such as is the case with John Gibbons-El being referred to as the reincarnated prophet, individuals referring to Richest Man dingle-el as the reincarnated prophet in the second form, how we refer to Timothy dingle-el as the resurrected prophet Noble Ali or Timothy dingle-el - Noble Ali. And these men are masters, grand masters of the teachings of the Prophet Noble Ali, and who are in the best position in terms of not just by us making a claim, but the works, their words, works, and deeds in the span of their physical forms that confirm them, in which that we respect them as representatives of the Prophet in their time while they were in the flesh, and we carry on that legacy of their teachings because it's in continuity. But that's how, those are the two ways in which, in my understanding, that one could see how the Prophet would approve it. Because he knew that, obviously, you read the Moorish Quran, he knew he was going to physically transition beyond the obvious facts of life. He knew, he wrote that he knew that all human beings are going to transcend in the physical form. We're not going to use the word death, but those that understand what I'm saying, physical death is not the end of life. So I want to be clear so that you understand that I'm not using a certain language. We say the Prophet transcended. Brother Jeff, we had a conversation earlier about this particular language that we use because the spirit's everlasting. I don't want to get too caught up. So the second part of the law that's instrumental when we look at it, it says, before acting upon by any members, let it be finance, property, or any line of life, or any line of life. What does that mean? Or any line of life that will cause the members to sacrifice finance, etc. We're gonna come back to that, but the main words I want to look at and focus on for now is finance, because we see that word mentioned twice. Whoever there's somebody who has to mute their phone. Slow. So he says the term finance twice. Okay? This is very important while we're going over this degree. And I'm going to take a segue before we go into more teachings of the Prophet pertaining to finance. Damon Dash and many others dealt with individuals within the Jewish community have made the claim that they refer to black people as liquid money. As liquid money. And the logic is simple. I'll read the quote from an article that Dame Dash claimed his colleague said to him. Those who don't know who Dame Dash is, he was one of the co-owners of Rockefeller, very instrumental in a clothing brand known as Rockaware that was very popular in New York City in the early 2000s, the Rockefeller Records label. And he was very instrumental in the career of Jay-Z and other artists that were very popular in the early 2000s. And this is what he had to say. We call you, and in quotations it's saying black people, But he's telling him, perceiving him as a black person, talking about our people as a whole, saying, we call you liquid money. The same way that water falls out of a man's hands, money typically seeps out of a black person's hands the same way. Your community gets money and immediately gives it all away to people who aren't black. We see that as a huge business opportunity. Now, see, some people will become resentful from this perspective, feeling that the Jewish community is predatory in their practices based on this statement and whatever preconceived notions a person may have of this community. But what's really being said here is that you black people are not responsible with money. As soon as you get it, you give it up. So we want to make sure that we get in the lion's share whenever we can. We look at it as a come up. You understand? And so that's the main purpose of me going into this explanation of the profit and finance, because we don't really realize how we are contributing to our own destruction, being irresponsible with the wealth that we are able to touch in America. They say blacks have 3.2 trillion in buying power. One of the statistics, the latest statistics that I read. Although that may have increased or decreased, I'm not aware, but within the 2000s, mid 2000s, the 2010s or whatever have you, we had 3.2 trillion in buying power. And other nations of people see that this wealth that we have, and they see our patterns of behavior. And so, are they wrong for seeing money being thrown on the floor and scrambling to run and pick it up? Or are we wrong for being irresponsible and just tossing that money on the floor and not using it to better ourselves and then complaining about our circumstances? And so the administration of the laws and customs of the Prophet Noble Jew Ali are supposed to help us alleviate this behavior pattern in ourselves. And so we're going to continue onward. But I just wanted to put that on the minds of the Moors, because in our lower self, in our lower state, we don't have a strong awareness of this. Okay? So can we get Act 2, Sheikh Zadi? I want you to start if a member is working.
Act 2.
No, start if a member, no, I'm sorry. Start if a member is found standing around on their meeting period.
Okay. Act 2. If members are found standing around on their meeting period, they should be fined 50 cents on the first case, and on the second will be fined $1, which will go in your emergency fund.
Hold on. Islam, let's stop right there. Let's just focus on the first part of what we read. If a member is found standing around on their meeting period, so their meeting period would be when there are official temple meetings. So this would be for members, it's Fridays and Sundays, according to the customs of the Prophet Noble Jew Ali that he established. But there could be other meetings called that members are required to attend. And standing around means the time, according to our laws, we must open and close promptly. We can't be just wasting time. If it's a time that we're supposed to start immediately at that time. So for those of us that was already on the call, right when our meeting period starts, Brother Jeff had something very important to convey to me. But I said to Brother Jeff to relegate all communication to text message, because our meeting's starting right now. It wasn't that what he was saying wasn't important, but because of the law, we had to start promptly. And so whatever we got to handle it to the side, right? We can't be standing around in our meeting period. We can't be wasting time. So you can't be hanging out with the Moors out in the hallway or, on the block, just talking and laughing, whatever. And on the second case, they shall be fined 50 cents on the first case. So the first time you caught with this infraction, you get a 50 cents fine at that time. So those of us that been with us for a long time, if you show up late, you know, there was usually Sheikh Muhammad or another member there that was standing at the door ready to collect your late fine. You could be like, you know, I don't have it right now, et cetera, et cetera. And on the second, we'll be fined $1, which would be $1 at that time. Okay, so that would be $5 for the first time, maybe. Let's say you wanted to evaluate the currency. In this day and time, maybe $5 and then $10 for every subsequent infraction of this law. So it served two functions. And the Grand Sheikh will always say, I would rather Moors come on time and keep the money in their pocket than have to pay a late fine. But so the first function that it serves is to make Moors serious about showing up to their meetings and being there on time, because there was a financial penalty to not do so. The second is those financial penalties go on which the Sheikh, he had finished reading. Let me read that second part. This is the second point of the reason why you would want this. Did you read which will go?
Which will go on your emergency fund.
Which will go on your emergency fund. So the Moors are supposed to, that's presuming that the Moors have an emergency fund. So these finances are supposed to be allocated to an emergency fund. So that if there's anything that comes upon the members or the temple as a whole, we would have the finances to resolve whatever issue. Whether it be a Moor is about to lose their home, or a Moor, you know, needs a loan to be able to pay their rent, or there's a major surgery that somebody's family member may need. So whatever crisis that could occur that would adversely affect the members, that fine will go there, right? So having a fund. First off, I want to look up what a fund is. So let's look at fund definition. Matter of fact, before we do that, let's look at finance definition, right? So I'm going to pull up, it just says, you know, the first Google dictionary definition. It says finance, the management of large amounts of money, especially by governments or large companies, right? And that's the finance in the noun sense. In the verb sense, provide funding for a person or enterprise. All right, so finance can be presumed as funding for something, right? Like I'm financing a business venture, that's funding, right? Or it could be the management of money, right? And the Prophet gave different types of what we call assets, right? Assets is something that retain value or make you money. It can appreciate in value and make you money, right? So one type of asset that we see in Act 1 is we see the word finance. And then the other type of asset, we see three types of assets: finance, property, and then the third asset is any line of life, right? So I'm going to define any line of life. An example for a modern example is the credit system. That's a form of a line of life because it will fall in the same category of things that you can utilize in this society to attain things that you need. Finance, property, you know, you could borrow against a mortgage to get, you know, a bank to loan you some money. And so having that property could be advantageous to you, right? And having credit, obviously, having credit is like having money that you don't have, that money that you don't have available now, someone allowing you to utilize, funds that you don't have, finance that you don't have. Let's look up credit definition real quick. Okay? Regular Google definition. Now, ability, I'm emphasizing certain words, because if you don't have credit, you don't have this ability. The ability of a customer to obtain, so the ability to obtain goods and services. So you can get goods and services if you have money, if you have cash, if you have liquid. That's another thing. You call cash liquid. Funny, they call us liquid money, right? But liquid money is cash. The ability of a customer to obtain goods or services before payment, based on the trust that payment will be made in the future. You see, Mars only focus on one part of this credit financial system, which is the debt, and they want to exploit the debt system through the knowledge of how to discharge debt. But we not even balanced, because you're not on the side. The rest of the world is not so focused on discharging debt as they are in accruing wealth, accruing goods and services, accruing property, accruing things of that nature. And discharging debt just means writing off debt, right? It doesn't, you can't buy things. Let me phrase this properly. Most, under normal circumstances, you cannot buy things with debt. There's exceptions and rules with institutions and things that you can do, but I don't want to get nobody confused. Okay, so we're going to look at what debt is. But the ability of a customer to obtain goods or services before payment based on trust that the payment will be made in the future. Why is this important? We're talking about a line of life here. Our people are notorious for not paying their debts. What are the ramifications or consequences in this modern society for not paying your debts? Well, the consequences or ramifications of that is your credit score gets lowered. So by discharging debt, you're not building a credit score. And therefore, you can't utilize this system of obtaining goods and services before payment by just discharging debt. You're just getting stuff off of your credit report, but you're not building what's known as credit history, showing that you can take on a debt and pay it off and make the payments as agreed upon and pay it off in full. That boosts your score. That gives an indication to creditors, people who will give you loans. All right, more is small time. Okay, many of these businesses and banks are getting thousands and hundreds of, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions and billions of dollars, and even trillions of wealth is being transferred through this system that we're not taking advantage of because we don't understand it on an individual level. If we don't understand on an individual level, then we won't be able to understand how to exploit this system on a collective level. Did somebody want to chime in? Did I hear somebody trying to say something? Nope. Okay. So let's look at the term, or we won't even focus on debt because I don't want to get too distracted. All right, so we define what finance is. We define what credit is. All right? And we're putting credit in the third category that the prophet mentioned. Now, I don't want to get more, I don't want more to come back later and say, oh, you know, the credit system that we have, you know, it started in 1930. Don't miss the point. It says, or any. You see the word any line of life. All right? So that lets us know if there are future lines of life that man innovates, we can utilize that line of life, right? The prophet couldn't predict Bitcoin, but does that mean that Moors couldn't generate finance and wealth from Bitcoin? Emphatically false. Okay? It made millionaires out of the average everyday people. So we can't say that, you know, we can't be ignorant and not evolve as the modern world is evolving, or trying to impose archaic common law systems on a modern system and just use that as our only means of, you know, doing whatever we're trying to accomplish. You see? Okay, so let's move on. Let me see. What's the next document I want us to go into? Property. Y'all more with me so far though? Y'all see where we going with this?
Islam, we working
And
sheep.
Islam. I just wanted to add on real quick because yeah,
Sure.
you know how you going in, how we have to pay our debts. It's even in our Moorish Holy Quran, chapter 31, verse 12. Pay the debts which you owe, for he who gave you the credit relieve thee upon thy honor, and to withhold from his due is both mean and unjust. So again, it's even in our lessons that pay your debt, so you can be stay on point. Islam.
Islamism. I appreciate that, she. And this is what I'm talking about when I talk about, adding your portion. I wasn't even thinking on that train of thought. It might have been in some of the records that Sheikh Muhammad has sent me. I haven't gone through all of them yet. I don't want to say I'm winging it, but I already had my structure of in terms of where I was going with this demonstration, and I knew it'd be in select places in the literature. It's, often on Sundays I find myself having to navigate at the same time of administering these meetings, so I don't always have my records available. And so I lean on my sheets because I know they know the words of the prophet. Islam. Thank you so much for that, Sheikh Sadiq. That added a lot to the. Actually, let me add on to what he just said. And so I got into a debate with a sister on Facebook one day, and it was obviously, the more I'm more out but we never get personal or really in terms of like, we just build it on the science for the most part. So me and a sister, we might have disagreed, but it was Islam at the end of it. And I think she took away something. People hear the word, debating, and they just think automatically we going at each other's necks. Now we've had a different philosophical perspective. I presented my argument. Well, she presented her argument. I presented mine, and then that was that. But ultimately, she was basically saying, and it all started about I don't even want to get to how it all started, but she was basically saying that essentially we could run our nation on this discharging debt methodology. And I explained to her, there are so-called 40 million plus so-called Black Americans. We have other groups of people who could find themselves within the confines of the scope of the Moorish movement. Maybe some of our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean, which we know are members of the Moorish Science Temple of America. You have Asiatics that may be considered Hispanic or Latino that are members of the Moorish Science Temple of America. And so they acknowledging their Moorish ancestry. And so, we gotta kind of be cognizant of all these things. I don't want to. It's so much to go through. I'm kind of. Anyway, let's get back because we didn't even finish Act 2. Let's just finish Act 2 real quick because it's only my second source. Can we get if a member is working?
Act 2, the bylaws, additional laws. If member is working, his monthly dues must be paid. And if he has money in the bank, he must subscribe for as much as he is able to the Moorish Uplifting Fund, because it takes finance to uplift the nation.
Islam. I'm a master at go off on tangents. You know what I'm saying? So I want to kind of try to keep focused. So again, I'm sorry, Moors. I'm sorry. I didn't even finish the narrative. I'm so all over the place. We got a lot of information to go through, and I want to try to get it on me, but I just can't rush it. Let me finish the narrative with the sister first, and then we'll get back to that part that you just read. Sorry about this, Muslims, and those Moors in the future listening to this. I said if 40 million plus of us all discharge debt, it would increase the national deficit, which would not only affect the services in America and the wealth in America that among all peoples who consider themselves citizens, but it would impact the international monetary system. Nations all over the world. This could cause famines. This could cause inflation. This could cause, you know, gas prices to skyrocket all over the place. The cost of living in the skyrocket all over the place. Why? Because Moors, who our people before they even know how to do this, rack up 3.2 trillion in spending. Now they could just write off anything. Could you imagine the trillions of dollars in 1 year, let alone a decade, and how that can cascade and destroy the economic system? What do you think all these other citizens of the America that account for the majority of the population are going to feel about you and how they're going to vote? What do you think the rest of the human beings on planet Earth that use the American dollar as the standard and have their economies through the import and export and other systems that interact, how do you think they're going to want to respond to you discharging? It's okay with a couple of, the Moorish movement ain't that big, and so Rome will deal with it as it comes. But can you imagine the fallout? Moors trying to write off, McLarens and mansions all over America while everybody else is trying to work hard to attain these things. How they will look at our Prophet Noble Jew Ali, how they will look at an individual wearing a fez or a turban in America, or talking about I'm a M.s.t.of Muslim. Oh, he's one of them. Get him out of here. And many Moors have been locked up by just using this unbalanced methodology to attain, whatever they have. And a lot of people, they was able to get a mansion or a big house for a while, but then wound up getting football numbers. Because you don't understand the arena you're entering in. You may understand the fraudulentness within the system, but you don't understand how many people depend upon this system to pay the people who run the electric grid, to pay the people who's managing the power plants, to pay the law enforcement officers who keeping the peace in this nation, to pay the military personnel who's keeping the peace, for American citizens. Ain't no bombs being dropped on us. Ain't no countries invading us. And you want to crash that system. We owed money. We should get paid, but let's do it the right way. There's a method to this. There's ways we can navigate in the system, and there's money that's owed to us. Us Brooklyn Moors, we advocate the policy of Abraham Lincoln because it's money that's accruing interest that's owed to us since the 1860s. But I don't want to get off on a tangent. That's a lesson from the past and a lesson for another day in the future. But so the system, once I made clear the magnitude, or if we all adopted her philosophy and worldview, and if we try to implement this process of what I call the radical Moors want to do, how it would destroy the economic system and how backlash and retaliation and hatred would be generated towards our people in the movement. Islam? So let's get back to what Sheikh Sadiq had read. If a member is working, his monthly dues must be paid. What are monthly dues? They are essentially taxes. People don't like taxes. Why don't you like taxes? Because you got to pay money. But people like benefits. When they want to retire, they want to collect Social Security. If they lose it all, they want to apply for WIC benefits and food stamps, but they don't want to pay taxes though. So the dues that you pay go into it's supposed to, and I can't speak for all Moorish Temples of Americas. I'm just talking about according to the writings of the Prophet Noble Drew Ali and my understanding how this is supposed to be administered throughout all Moorish Temples of America who are adherent to the Prophet law. These dues that are collected are supposed to be for the administration and the benefit of the Moors. Why? Because sheikhs are trustees. We the ones who collect the you have different offices, different bodies. They may have a business manager or different people, but dues are collected, they're counted, and then they're deposited however they're deposited, or stored or saved up however they're stored or saved up, depending on the buyer. There's no specifics in the law on how this is done. But we're gonna get into where the Prophet mentions a national treasurer, like in the ancient. We're gonna get into that. But suffice to say, just like you go to work and you pay your taxes, you don't directly, may actively pay it, but they'll take it out of your check for those that do pay taxes. And that money will go to, say people want to go to college, they want to fill out a FAFSA, they can get a Pell Grant. Federal government pays for education for low-income people. And you have on a state level, et cetera, et cetera. This is where the taxes goes to. The malls are supposed to be able to build up services for the community through these dues. And the services don't got to be something so extreme. It could be something as simple as, hosting Moorish events. It costs money to do that. To rent out a hall, right? To even have a building, keep the lights on, so that Moors could come and congregate and discuss whatever affairs, right? To celebrate the holy days, to have food at these events so that everyone can eat and we can build stronger bonds through these rituals, right? To be able to provide certain, depending on whatever the individual temple may need, as well as the collective temple may need. Maybe there's something, a program or a campaign that Moors are trying to create or produce. It costs money. And so the members who are working, who are law-abiding citizens, got a 9-to-5 job, they pay their monthly dues. And that's what the dues are for, right? And we try to avoid spending money wherever possible, utilizing whatever programs. That's why we don't demonize non-for-profits. We just only say that the Prophet Noble Jew Ali didn't establish the Moorish Temple of America as a non-for-profit. But does that mean that we can't establish one? Of course we can. In any other type of business, LLC or whatever else. So we all pay dues, those of us that can. And it says, and if he has money in the bank, he is subscribed for as much as he is able. So if you have some extra bread lying around, subscribe for as much as you are able to the Moorish Uplifting Fund. Because it takes finance to uplift a nation. Are we a nation of people that need uplifting? Well, it can't be done without finance. What is the fund? What is a fund? Did we look up fund? No, we didn't. So let's look up fund definition, because we've heard that word several times mentioned so far. So, simple Google Dictionary definition: fund, as a noun, is a sum of money saved up or made available for a particular purpose. So there are two funds that the Prophet mentions. There's an emergency fund, and there's a Moorish uplifting fund. Make sure I call it the Moorish uplifting fund. So there's two different funds that every Moorish Temple of America should have. Why? Because it takes finance to uplift a nation. Right? So we see finance in Act 1. We see finance in Act 2. Let's look at Act 3. Can we get Act 3 real quick?
Islam. Act 3. It is the lawful and divine duty of every good member, if he is able in finance, to aid
right
me in...
There we go. The word finance again. So the Prophet... All right, well, let me connect it like this. When the American Constitution was written, you had the 7 organic articles, right? And then later on, through some deliberation and negotiations, they came up with what was called the Bill of Rights, very shortly after, in the same time frame, to account for things that need some more specifications, which were the rights of the people. We don't want to leave that out. We want to specify this, zoom. And so, in a similar fashion, the Prophet had these 7 organic laws that was originally created, what they call the Divine Constitution and bylaws, and then he wrote an additional 7 laws, 2 of which are repeated from the first, which is called the additional laws. So he added on to the laws, specifically totaling 14 primary laws in the Constitution. But again, Acts 6 and 7 are repeated from the original laws. And in the first 3 of the additional laws, this is how much the Prophet had it on his mind. He used the word finance in all 3 of the first acts of the Moorish Temple of America. That's why we looked that word up, to see what it is. He repeated it. Take heed. Let's continue. So, Sheikh Sadiq, you can I guess you could start from the top since I cut you off. Right there.
It is Act 3. It is the lawful and divine duty of every good member, if he is able in finance, to aid me in saving the nation. And if he does not, he is an enemy to the cause of uplifting his own people, and justice must catch you.
So stop right there. Stop right there. It is it's not only it's the lawful. Why is it the lawful duty? Because it's in the law. Just like paying taxes is in the Constitution. That's in the law too. That's why we do not advocate against paying taxes. We advocate against paying unconstitutional, unfair taxes. Taxes. We don't even argue unfair. If it's unconstitutional, we argue against that. If it violates the Constitution, because I don't even want to leave wiggle room for more to say what's fair and unfair. If it's but we believe in taxation. All governments, administration are operated off the taxes of the people. That's where the wealth of governments to do what they do comes from. So every service from public schools to everything else to the reparations of the roads, restorations of certain landmark, all of these things that government does that you don't even think about. That little $100-something, $20-something come out of your check goes into a collective fund. And that collective fund or trust or whatever they establish will go to pay out different stuff. All right? The equivalent of the sheiks would be the legislators who will determine how these finances are spent from year to year for the benefit of the beneficiaries, which are the American citizens. Okay? And so it is not only the lawful duty, but it's a divine duty. Why is it a divine duty? Because it's necessary, because it takes finance to uplift the nation. And we are the nation that needs upliftment in this day and time. And through it, we can, by uplifting this nation, this fallen Moorish nation, by uplifting it, we can uplift fallen humanity. But it cannot be done without finance. And so we're not saying that should you empty your coffers and empty your pockets, and I wouldn't even recommend giving your money to anybody if you don't know and you don't trust the leadership in power that's managing that money. But if you're a member of a body, it's your law to pay your dues. If you're a good member, then you will adhere to your duty in any way that you can. It's not like I said, I don't think that more's got to go broke, but you want people that's smart in positions to manage it, as well as you want, at least that's what you would want to see. And you will want to see that, our people are actively taking a vested interest in the administration of their own governments and communities. And so this is what is required to do what? According to the prophet's word, to aid me in saving the nation. And if he does not, if you don't want to do this, and it's Allah gave you free will for a reason, you could decide, man, forget what Sheikh m.s.t.of talking about. I'm keeping my money in my pocket. I'm not even part of his body. I ain't caring about my body neither. You know what I mean? They're gonna figure it out. Like, I'm just, here to get these degrees, and that's it. That's fine. You can do that. But justice will catch you, because it must. Why will it catch you? Because you are enemy to the upliftment of your own people. A lot of Moors want to point to Europeans as being the enemy. No, you are the enemy, according to the prophet, of uplifting his own people, of uplifting your own people. He says his own people, but he's an enemy to the cause of uplifting his own people, meaning your own people. And justice must catch you. And this is the power that the prophet invested in his hands through the will of Allah. And an enforcement of this law is required in order to save the nation. Okay? So in the first three laws, we have this phenomena of finance. All right, I might have to lean on Sheikh Muhammad for the rest of this, because he's going to be going into specific degrees and he already knows where we're going because he, did the due diligence to collect and send them to me. And so, Sheikh Muhammad, if you there, can we get the Prophet has spoken, November 8th, 1928 on a Friday? So he's gonna skip to it if he can get to it. But the beginning part of this is the importance of being a Moorish leader and not doing being a moral person, not being doing things that will harm the image of the Moorish Science Temple of America. Studying your Quran to be a good leader and things of that nature. Sheikh Muhammad, are you there? There you go. You have to unmute your mic. I was about to tell you.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't know. Pardon me, most. What was it that you wanted exactly read, Muslim?
The Prophet has spoken. The highlighted part.
Islam. The Prophet has spoken. Friday, November 9th, Holy Day, 1928. No finance businesses are to be open with any group of members of any temple by the governor or grand sheikh or whoever in charge without the consultation of me, the Prophet. All
right there. There we go right there. We see the word finance again. And you want to hear something crazy? And I need any more to chime in. And this is why I need your contribution, because other people are going to be listening to this. From my research and my knowledge and studies of the Prophet Noble Jew Ali, I have never read him use the word money. I always see the word finance. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong or if they have a recollection of it, and I'd like to read that excerpt. But he talks about things that's relative to money, but I never heard him use the word. Read him use the word. That's how he speaks to me. Me reading, I hear his voice. That's how he speaks to me. But I see this word finance and funds. I see that replete in various different works, and that's why we're going through this demonstration. Okay? So let's continue.
Islam. All uplifting funds, books are to be issued only through me, the Prophet, because that
right
money,
there. Hold on, let's not rush through that.
He said that.
Here we go. He said all uplifting funds. We speak English here, right? We master this language. The word funds, meaning plural, it's supposed to be multiple uplifting funds, according to the Prophet Noble Jew Ali. We went over two specific funds. And he says all uplifting funds books are to be issued only through me, the Prophet. Why? Because during that time, if you read other works, Moors was embezzling money. They were stealing from the temple. They were stealing from the Prophet. And so he wanted a recordation of all incoming money, all businesses, anything that's going to be done through members of the temple. I need to know about it. And I need to see it on paper. This is how the Prophet set it up. But look, I'm gonna let you see something. When you look at any business in America, you can look at their books. It's all public information. If you're looking at, let me say that again. Those that are traded like on the NASDAQ, S&P, et cetera, you can look at all of their public companies. And so all the information is public. Right? And so in a company, all companies keep records. This is why there's an education program in colleges called accounting, bookkeeping, in order to be able to see every penny that come in and every penny that go out, to know how much you have, how much assets you have available, how much funds, how much finance you have available, and how much debt you have. Okay? And so that the Prophet would know if some money was missing, if some more calling himself a sheik that was given a certain responsibility is actually dirty, he'd be able to catch him. or at least he'd be able to catch and know that somebody's stealing. I may not know who it is, but somebody in this temple is stealing from his own people. You know what I'm saying? So let us continue. And we're going to see the word finance again in that same sentence. I stopped Muhammad. It was a comma, not a period. But I didn't want to speed past that first part because I wanted more to understand that this is how you could have and trust in whatever dues that you pay, because these records are supposed to be kept. All right, so it's not just one person that makes up a grand body or whatever, and investigations can ensue and whatever have you. If you know, any significant amount of money goes missing, and this is how we can hold our leadership accountable, and our leadership can hold each other accountable. We can hold each other accountable in that way that, you know, we can trust, you know, because a lot of people, you know, are accused of scamming in what's called a conscious community. And there have been literally people have donated millions of dollars to causes to uplift our own people. You know, I'll just use one mainstream one, which is the Black Lives Matter movement. They got millions of dollars and did nothing for the people. But we are able to know, because, you know, they are non-for-profit and they records, we are able to know how much money they got. And so that caused a huge controversy. And then now, you know, don't donate to Black Lives Matter. They just taking our bread. You see what I'm saying? We can hold them accountable. There are other, I don't want to, you know, bring up any individuals in the conscious community, but I've seen a lot of controversies. Numerous people, including some very well-known, prominent people, have been accused of stealing from our people. You misappropriating money and spending it on themselves. And so we don't want that to happen. And the prophet certainly didn't want that to happen. And so this is why, you know, he, you know, wrote this particular work and other works about embezzlement and things of that nature. And there were all kinds of fallouts in this short span of time, you know, with, you know, Claude Green claiming to be the prophet and starting his own administration, and then just different, you know, a lot of violence ensued and things of that nature predicated upon this particular circumstance. And so, you know, you don't want to play with people's money, or you don't, you know, or the people's money, should I say, because, you know, that's going to cause conflict. And some wars ain't built for that type of life. You know what I mean? To be stealing from, you know, a righteous people that believe in justice. You know? So I'm sorry, Sheikh Muhammad, you could continue.
Islam. All uplifting funds books are to be issued only through me, the prophet, because that money is to finance the Moorish movement.
Stop right there. Can you say that? Can you say that again? Because what's that money for?
That money is to finance the Moorish movement.
So right there, this is what your dues are for. They're supposed to go into these funds, and these funds are supposed to finance the Moorish movement. Finance the Moorish movement how? Like I said, keeping the lights on, acquiring properties to having whole meetings, to down to, like I said, organizing events, down to starting businesses, which obviously is something that is a missing element in the modern Moorish movement on a large enough scale, because the Moors in the Prophet's time was shaking and moving. They were shaking and moving. They had the Moorish Young Men's Business League, and they had an auxiliary league for the sisters. Somebody jump in with that.
Islam, yeah, you're right.
Islam. So finance was a major focus in the Moorish movement in this time. They were involved in politics, but they was also involved in finance. So people would talk about Oscar the priest and things, but they would talk about the prominent business moves. John Gibbons L, particular body, who we refer to as the reincarnated prophet, his particular body was a very industrious body. They had all kinds of businesses, much wealth among those members in the 20s and in the 30s and onward. There were Moors. There was a whole Moorish colony that took finance. They didn't do what these Moors is doing outside of the temple discharging debt and adverse possession to seize that property. They put that money together. They paid it off fund. They used that fund to procure land. And then they built on that land and formed what was known as that Moorish colony. Okay? So that's what it's meant by, because that money is to finance the Moorish movement. I don't want to see none of you Moors broke. And I don't want to see none of you Moors get robbed of your money. But I do want to see this Moorish movement financed. I do want to see Moors being, having some type of business acumen, hiring other Moors, having businesses where they have the ability to hire and give our people jobs. They don't necessarily got to call themselves Moorish Americans. They may get there at some point, but just businesses where Asiatics can flourish, feed their families. We got all this wealth of knowledge and can't do nothing with it. Can't rub two pennies together to make a wish. But this is not how this movement started. And so sometimes you gotta go backwards to go forward. You driving in the car, a pathway is blocked off, you gotta back up and go around another way. You gotta go back the way you just came sometimes. And so we're gonna go back to the prophet to figure out which way we need to go in the future. Sheikh Muhammad, you could continue with that. I'm sorry, Muslim. Oh, wait. Another important point. So I had brought up that I never see the prophet use the word money. Here it go right there. Because that money is to find. He used the word money and finance in the same sentence. I wanted to bring that up because I don't think none of y'all caught that. But there go the word money right there. Because that money is to finance the Moorish movement. So, like I said, I didn't say he didn't see it. I didn't have a recollection of the word. Because I've seen finance so many times. But I'm like, why doesn't he use the word money? Well, we have it right there. But Sheikh Muhammad, you gotta unmute your mic more. You can start from the head of any temple.
Islam. The head of any temple can maintain an emergency funds which cannot exceed the amount of from 25 to 50 cents a week per member.
So stop right there. Okay? So this is important right here. Okay? The head of any temple. Any temple that, any subordinate temple. It don't got to be the Grand Major Temple. Any temple can do this according to Prophet Noble Drew Ali. So those Moors that are, under other bodies and they're a subordinate temple, this is their divine right to save up money on behalf of each member. They allowed to keep that amount of money. But he says that those emergency funds cannot exceed the amount of from 25 to 50 cents a week per member. Right? So they can maintain an emergency fund, meaning a temple could say, you got to pay your dues, but we also have, additional for this particular fund. We have, so we'll add this on top of the dues. So when we look at it, from say your dues are $10, a meeting. So you meet twice a week, that's $20, right? And then, maybe $5 for emergency fund a week or something like that. I'm just throwing numbers out there. You could adjust these to fit the times.
Islam.
That was just specifically for that particular period. Those the 25 cent, 50 cent. Obviously, it would be. I heard you, Mark. I got you right now. Obviously, it would be ludicrous to, charge somebody $1 for being late. Like, people just gonna be late and not care. You know what I'm saying? Or charge somebody, 25 cents for emergency fund. It's not gonna help anybody, or really deal with any emergency other than the emergency of somebody not having, I don't know, Tic Tacs or something. Like, it doesn't help. Islam, Sheikh, you wanted to add on?
Islam, yes, because there used to be some controversy of why we would have a weekly payment or due in relation to our bi-monthly due. So one was for the uplifting of the Moorish lifting fund, that which your monthly dues in. But when we was asking for the weekly donation, that is for the emergency fund. That was how we was able to have functions and be able to pay the rent for our meetings. So when you see this 25 cents, And this dollar, 25 and 50 cents is reflective to the same amount of money. As we said before, we didn't, when it came to the late fine, it wasn't that we was trying to charge money, but we were staying in line with the law in relation to the inflation from 1928 to the present. So here it is, right here in the literature, you have a weekly due and you have a monthly due. Both dues have their own function going to two different funds that have their own function as well.
Islam, thank you, Sheikh Muhammad. I have to I'm glad that he clarified that because I kind of reversed it. But yeah, there's as he said, there's a monthly, and as our law says, there's a monthly dues. But this is, while we were collecting on a weekly basis. And so I'm glad that Sheikh was here to clarify that. Cause I'm so focused on trying to get to the next thing, and I might mix up a detail or two, and that's why I need y'all more that are on the call to be on point because we know this is going online, and we want to be as accurate as we can be in the dissemination of the information that we're given. And so if I'm incorrect or I might be off or I might have a detail misconstrued, please, Islam, and I'll maybe finish what I'm saying. I might hold on 1 second more, but we'll get that corrected so that when Moore's here, if they listen to it through the duration, they'll be able to get all the facts as we know it in this present moment in time. So thank you for that, Sheikh. Does anybody want to add on before we continue? The floor is open. Any members, guests?
As long, first I rise to
Islam,
my highest height. As long, First I rise to my highest height, giving proper praise to the Father God Allah, the promise of all prophets, and the last prophet, these days, the top prophet, l.t.p.f.j. I'm Jeffrey Rondi, the John Peace. And you said monthly and weekly is like the same cycle too. Bills come every month, and also you get paid weekly during those times. So it flows along with maintaining, what we establish moving forward. I just want to add that on.
Yes,
Islam, appreciate you, Muslim.
thank you more because I was asked to get some information, and the information of finance, you see that this system is actually over 8,000 years as old, and it actually stems from Sumeria. Even the way we govern time through seconds and minutes come from the mathematical structure of the week and the month, coming from the Sumerians, but that's later on in the demonstration. But as you can say, yes, this system of finance, we are the mothers and fathers of civilization. It's been around for a long time. We just might not recognize it in its modern form. That's all. Islam.
Islam. And so when we get through the end of this, I think Muhammad, we're gonna if you can, Sheikh, we'll probably go to that ancient degree and then get back to the prophet. And so if you can, through Allah's will, please continue where you left off, Sheikh.
Islam indeed. All public collection and dues, also to the supporting of each said temple and its domestic works. No finance book is to be in any temple except by the prophet. The head of every temple must.
All right, let's stop right there. So, because this is chock full of important information to understand the administration responsibilities and protocols of the Moorish Science Temple of America. Okay? And so you can't overcharge your members' dues, right? He limited it to 25 to 50 cents a week per member. So if you're going to create an emergency fund, what is the principle behind that? You can't overburden the people, right? That's like overtaxing. That's not going to be productive for the people to be able to maintain a quality of life and at the same time grow the emergency fund. Okay, so the prophet's objective was not to break the people's pocket and fleece them like prosperity preachers. And it's not us talking about the radical about the church. We're talking about specifically those individuals that are about getting money through spreading, religion. This is not that. So any money that's collected, all public collections and dues, also to the supporting of each said temple and its domestic works. So its domestic works is, what does domestic mean? We already know that. It means at home. So whatever work that particular temple is doing in its surrounding community, that's what the funds is talking about. No finance book, meaning these are your financial records. When he says finance book, these are your financial records. No financial records. Is to be in any temple except by the prophet. Okay? So it gotta go through the prophet, and it gotta be, and at his particular time, it's just basically, if you got any records, I gotta be privy to them. If there's a book in your temple maintaining money, it's through me. All right. So specifically speaking to those Moors at that time, but for the Moors in this time, for it to go through the prophet, again, for our particular body at the time, Timothy dingle-el, he would have sat in the seat of the prophet Noble Juali with that particular degree. All right. But those who have the powers vested in them by the prophet will sit in his seat in order to keep these books in this day and time, and obviously in the future going forward, until another prophet is raised among us. The head of every temple. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm about to read. Okay, Sheikh Muhammad ended right there. Okay, let's continue.
Islam. No finance book is to be in any temple except by the prophet. The head of every temple must by law, obey the word of the prophet. And if any leader or head of any temple fails to obey these laws, embezzlement is the charge and is subject to enforcement of the law by the grand body. And the penalty
Islam. So that's the burden placed upon anybody who's managing finance on behalf of the temple. You charge with embezzlement, and the grand body is able to enforce it by the law. Now, don't think that you can just get away with stealing and I'm gonna just leave the temple then. No. The law ain't just the Moorish laws. There's laws of the United States of America, and the grand body can choose to prosecute you. They can choose to take you to court civilly or have you charged criminally for stealing from the people, from stealing from the organization founded by the Prophet Noble Ali, the prophet in these days and times, who has the blessing of Allah to raise our people from a dead state to a living state.
Islam,
If you want to steal from anybody and steal from anywhere but there, if you're going to steal. Obviously, Allah forbids stealing, but if you're going to do that, this is the worst place karmically is you can try to rob. But if we catch you, those of us that are empowered to prosecute you, we will utilize the law to do so, because it is our charge in law to do such, to enforce the laws of the Prophet. Islam, Muslim, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, yes, Sheikh. I'm actually in the process of starting a foundation, nonprofit, and you right exact in what you're saying, because what I'm reading at where I'm at is federal state compliance with the IRS, and the board members of the foundation is responsible for overseeing all the financial matters. And if there's not a record or trace of where the money is being spent and allocated, then there's going to be an issue. That could damage the foundation dramatically. I yield the floor.
Islam. So you're going to see how this punishment is enforced within the Moorish Science Temple of America. But don't think that we don't have remedy if you choose to not obey the laws of the Prophet anymore and think that you're going to escape and get away. No, justice will catch you. But let us continue, because these are the prescribed actions of retribution that are at the disposal of the sheiks in the grand body based on the laws of the Prophet. Sheikh Muhammad, you can continue. I think it's only one more sentence in this reading.
Islam. Embezzlement is the charge and is subject to the enforcement of the law by the grand body, and the penalty may be a fine or removal from office or placed under a very restriction of the law. Supreme words of the Prophet, Noble Drawing.
Now, those of us that speak this English language, I want you to pay attention to the words. He says the penalty may be, meaning that there are some discretionary. This is not an exhaustive list of what actions that the grand body can take in order to, pursue justice. This is the supreme words of the Prophet. Islam. So we're going to move on to another work. I want to put the perspective of finance on a Moor's mind, administration of business on a Moor's mind. The m.s.t.of of America is a body politic and corporate. It has a corporate feature to its Rotarian system. Just like other nations in the modern world have a corporate feature as well as a national or body politic feature, government feature. Islam? So Sheikh Muhammad, can we go to the next one? I think it's the Prophet pleading the nation, also on a holy day, March 1st, 1928.
Islam. The Prophet.
Wait. Before you do that, let's get that excerpt out of your favorite financial quote. Can you read that briefly? Go into that, and then we'll move on to that reading.
Islam. Well, that's long, like 2-3 pages, because I have to explain some of the context. You want me to do that now?
Man, I don't know, because for time management purposes.
I mean, I could skim through it. I'll read.
Let's try to contain it to maybe 5-10 minutes. More like, let's keep it on the 5 to 8 minute range.
I don't even need that, more. That's good.
Okay, yeah, that works. Let's do that.
Right, Islam.
Go ahead, Mo. You got the floor.
Islam, Mos. This is Sheikh Muhammad Bey. So I'm reading out of a book, and this book, it can definitely help anyone who's engaged in finance, or if you're not engaged in finance as far as being industrious, as far as you knowing how to govern your own money, this will help, because if you can't manage $1,000, you cannot manage $1 million. It's just a mathematical principle. So then this book is called The Richest Man in Babylon. This is a book widely purported by Moors and everybody of the light, erudites everywhere, people who see themselves as intelligent, who deal with finance. And the reason why they use this book is because it explains something called the 10% clause. When people talk about finance, they always tell you to save 10% of your earnings before you do anything else and get into this habit. And then within time, you will be able to have a nest egg to either have for emergencies or to uplift yourself or to invest. So the protagonist of this book, the main person of this book, the hero of this book, his name is Arcad. He is the so-called richest man in Babylon. But if you have true for more sciences, it's true for finance. If you was ever a master, it's because you are a master student who sat underneath a master. Islam. So we're going to read into this. Like I said, I'm about to read fast, but I don't want anything to be missed out. It's long. Give me a few seconds to get to the meat and potatoes of this. All right, it's long. So his adept is the money loaner of the province of Babylon at this time. So every person who deals with any type of finance, they have to come through him. So this is who Arcad goes to learn about his finances. So I'm gonna read. A 12th month after Algamesh had gone, he again returned and said to me, Son, have you paid yourself not less than 1/10 of all that you have earned for the past year? I answered proudly, Yes, master, I have. That is good, he answered, beaming up to me. And what have you done with it? I have given it to Asmar, the brickmaker, who told me he was traveling over the far seas, and in Tayi he would buy for me rare jewels of the Phoenicians. When he returns, we shall sell these at high price and divide the earnings. Every fool must learn, he growled. But why? Trust the knowledge of a brickmaker about jewels. Would you go to the bread maker to inquire about the stars? No, by my tunic. You will go to the astrologer. If you had power to think, you will know your savings are gone. Youth, you have jerked your wealth tree up by the roots. But plan another, try again. So when it comes into the area of finance, even though we may have been entrepreneurs in our own outright, or maybe had some type of financial ventures in the past, which give us the confidence to enter money field. So because I know how to sell lemonade, maybe I might be a good car salesman. I have people skills. No, this is a totally different field of finance that governs this way itself way different than just a nominal stand. There's certain things you will have to learn. So when going forward, when you're being taught about finance, you have to deal with the masters or deal with the system of finance that's in place at that time. And as I was stating earlier with the brother Jeff, this book was authored by George Clason, but it comes from parables of the Babylonians from 8000 BC, from the walls of Sumeria and Babylon and clay tablets that was exhumed. So this was their way of governance at this time. When you go into page 3, it talks about the industrious acts of the Muslims, and it speaks about certain land masses of Egypt, Mecca, Palestine. And as you can see, even within this record, within this parable, when it comes to trade, these same areas are mentioned. When you look at the development of Israel, they too went to Tyre for their resources that they needed for their development plan at that time. So this is not anything new. What you were 2,000 years ago, you are today, and you are your ancestors without a doubt with contradiction, even relation to finance. With that, I say peace.
Islam, Muslims. So moral of the story, right? You have a very wealthy man. He goes to a guy comes up to him and says, "Yo, I know how to get mad bread. Like if you got mad bread, I can bountify that. I can make it way more money. Like yo, these people out in that country of Tyre, yo, they got these precious gems, these precious stones. I mean, precious gems. If you were able to acquire them with the amount of wealth that you got, bring it back, yo, you could flip that crazy, man. Quadruple, 10 times, 100 times your wealth." And this bricklayer convinced this aristocrat, this businessman, this wealthy, richest man in the land, that if he gives him this finance and he goes over to Tyre, he will be able to procure him some type of goods that will make him even more wealthy. And when it didn't pan out, he goes to someone he looks at as a mentor. The mentor tells him, This is one of them mistakes that fools make. You know what I'm saying? You went to a bricklayer about precious stones, but you wouldn't go to, I forgot what person he used, but somebody who was not in the occupation to go to look at the stars, like somebody who's in a completely irrelevant occupation. But you will go to astrologer, right? He said, no, you will go to astrologer. Exactly. So why are you going to this bricklayer about money? He knows how to lay bricks. That's what he does. And why is this lesson important? Because a lot of Moors are going to other Asiatics who don't have no wealth and following them in some of these sovereign citizen teachings in terms of discharging debt, adverse possession of properties, and then finding themselves getting 10, 15 years in prison or other negative things, being charged an enormous amount of fines that the government is going to enforce you to pay, and all kinds of things, all because you went to the bricklayer instead of a financial expert. You ain't go to somebody who's going to help build your credit. You ain't going to go to somebody who's going to help you to start or manage an investment portfolio and manage your retirement. You went to some dude who hasn't gotten any prescribed education, doesn't have any particular expertise. He just started studying on YouTube, heard some stuff, went out and tried it, and it seems like he's successful. So, it hasn't caught up to him, or he may have been able to finagle the system, and you think that's going to guarantee to work for you. And then you find yourself in a financial mess, or even a mess where you lose your freedom, all because you go into the bricklayer. Islam. And so now I want to go, and this is ancient wisdom that is applicable to modern times. Some proverbs are they just will always be relevant to mankind. So let's move on to the next one. You remember the excerpt I said for you to read, Sheikh Muhammad. You can start. You got the highlighted part and all that.
Islam. The Prophet pleads a nation, Friday, March 1st, 1928. This is coming from the second paragraph. I know all true American citizens are identified by national and national descent names to answer and apply to the free national constitution, this free national republic of the United States of America. That's why I am calling on all true national citizens to help me morally and financially in my great work. Islam. I'll continue reading. You also have another excerpt, which this is the general laws as said by the Prophet, Friday, November 9th, 1928. And while I read this, I want you to put on your minds what was read at the beginning of the meeting. Special message to all L's and B's. Islam, because the language that the master used is coming from our Prophet. Islam. Every temple in the head is to function by words, deeds, and action imitating the Prophet, especially when teaching a group of Moors, any group of Moors, these are the general laws. The supreme laws will be handed you later. The head of all temples are to submit a report monthly of all finances. Islam.
Islam, Sheikh. So I don't want to do too much reading without going into some of the degrees. So, starting off where you left off at, the work that the Prophet's talking about in the Prophet Plea to a Nation about calling on all true American citizens. He's not even limited to the members of the Moorish movement. He's talking about all American citizens in general that understand what he's trying to do. He called on them to help him in the moral work and the financial aspect of this work. Okay? So the Prophet is constantly talking about these finances. And it's not because he's some money grubbing person who was trying to rob the people. Clearly, we know in this day and time, now that his whole entire lifespan in a physical form has culminated, we can see that he had a truly noble purpose. And so get into the general laws. The Prophet, this is on a Friday, this is another holy day meeting. A lot of holy day meetings, the Prophet was handing down law. And he says that when you teach in any group of Moors, and another important part is he's saying these are the general laws. So the Prophet said we got general laws now. These are the general laws that everybody needs to know. But then he said the supreme laws will be handed down to you later. But see, there's no other work written by the Prophet that is referencing this particular excerpt, because this was written Friday, November 1928. So to my knowledge and studying, these supreme laws did not get handed down in that physical form. And so us Moors in this body, we understand that, spirit is everlasting, and that spirit of the prophet, through his teachings, have been made manifest through individuals that whose lifespans continued on or even began after the prophet Noble Drew Ali. But that same spirit of truth dwell within them as it dwell within the prophet. And so Timothy Dingle-el is a man who handed down these supreme laws through the understanding of the resurrection charter, and how that goes into this Grand Sheik's demonstration about how the whole Moorish movement fell into public domain, and how this supreme law is handed down later. It was a way of reining in the Moorish movement back and putting temples who all of their operations are in public domain, putting it in some form of protection, which is the highest form of protection because it's federal. These charters are the resurrection charter is a federal charter, the highest form of protection. Why is that federal charter? Because it's a charter obtained through copyright registration. And so that puts us in the federal domain, federal jurisdiction. And so that's all in accordance with the supreme law. But staying in tandem with the demonstration, they ought to submit a monthly report of all finances. This is the general law. So the prophet had Moors, once they collected whatever money they had left over, whatever they had to send a financial report. So you think that McDonald's ain't doing that to other, franchises within the, other, franchises under that umbrella of McDonald's and other companies that have, chains or different businesses? You think they're not giving an account of their finances on a monthly basis? Emphatically. The prophet is just implementing that system in the Moorish Science Temple of America because it's effective of accountability of all money and to prevent those that have access to the money from stealing it without and it being stolen and going unnoticed. All right, Sheikh Muhammad, you could continue.
Islam. So to stay within the spirit of the demonstration, I'm not going to read the entire writing, but excerpts relative. So I'm going to skip to the next part of this writing. Follow divine principle, for if you don't restrict to this divine principle, then you are not a true Moor, and the heads are not to charge for membership or to overcharge for cards, buttons, or for anything issued by the prophet. Those who contribute.
Islam. I just wanted. So the prophet again, he's not trying to fleece the people. Some Moors, and not just Moors, but just people in general. A very famous example of a guy who wrote a lot of books. He got caught in a scandal, but we're going to go into that. But the idea of providing these things and not overcharging. You read the Moorish Quran, he said you can get this Moorish Quran at expense. He know that as a people that we don't have a lot of access of liquid, meaning readily available finances to spend and procure things. And so he don't want to overcharge Moors for anything. Anything. It says cards, buttons, or anything issued by the prophet. So anything you get through the temple, you ain't supposed to be overcharged for. Right? And let's see how the prophet feels about people who are charging people. First off, membership. You don't get charged for membership. If anybody claims to be the Moorish Science Temple of America and they are charging you to become a member, they are a violation of the general laws as laid down by the prophet Noble Drew Ali. Okay? For you to receive your card, your button, anything that is sold in the temple, you cannot be overcharged for. Anything relating to the prophet. If it's issued in the name of the prophet, you cannot overcharge for it. And let's see how the prophet feels about those that do. Islam, Sheikh, you can continue, but be sure I'm going to interrupt you very soon.
Islam. And also to put on the mind of the people that may be listening, some people may use fanciful terms for charge, meaning donation, tuition, free will offering. It's all the same. Membership is free. You should not be coming out of pocket for membership, period, in any capacity. Islam. Those who contribute to either of the preceding are not Moors but robbers. Membership.
Islam, hold on a second. According to the Prophet Noble Jew Ali, these people who could be members of the Moorish Temple of America and Moors by birth because their descent nature don't change. He says, this is not a mere, that wasn't Sheikh Muhammad, this Prophet Noble Jew Ali speaking. And this is his words. Those who contribute to either of the preceding, meaning either you violating these, you're not adhering to this principle, you charging either for membership or you overcharging. So that's one. The first thing is charging for membership. Ain't no such thing as overcharging. It's free. You can't be charged for membership. So if you're charging for membership, you are not a Moor according to the Prophet Noble Jew Ali. All you are is a robber. And if you charging, or not charging, because you do have to pay for cards, buttons, because these things are not free to produce. And so, therefore, these things cost money. But the overcharge, somebody be like, yeah, you want a button for the Moorish Untitled America? You give me $20, I got you. Pay $3 for the pen or $5 or whatever on Amazon, and gonna charge you 4 times the price, so that you can represent the Moorish Untitled of America. No, that person is a robber. He's robbing. He's not a Moor. Not according to the Prophet. Because Moors use, well, man, the sin nature don't change. They'll use the Prophet's words in that regard to prove that they are Moor. But they won't use parts where the Prophet will deny you as a Moor. That part Moors will gloss over or never read or never adhere to. Now, again, if somebody's charging you outside of the temple in the name of the Prophet, they robbers too, even if it doesn't call the Moorish Temple of America. But they're using the name of the Prophet Noble Jew Ali, they're using the works of the Prophet Noble Jew Ali, and then they're utilizing that in such a way to kind of detract from the temple. Don't give no money to the temple. Nah, give it to me. They're robbers. They are robbers. Because the Prophet didn't found the organization they claiming. And it's okay. You can be a Moorish American and found any kind of organization that you want. But don't steal from the Prophet in the process. Say this ain't the Moorish Temple of America. This is not, sanctioned by Prophet Noble Jew Ali. I am a Moorish American as an individual, and I thought that this service or whatever I am providing is something that could benefit the community, and this is the price that I charge. Then I won't say you fall into the category of a robber in that respect. But don't use the Prophet to make money. Don't use the Prophet to make money. Do not use the Prophet Noble Jew Ali to make yourself rich, to make yourself money. Find another hustle. Don't violate this divine principle. Not because Sheikh Amir says so, but because you don't want justice to catch you. Islam, let's continue.
Islam. Membership, sister and brother, is free, not only here but all over the world. The button is 25 cents. The card is 25 cents, and 1 month dues is paid. Every member pays 50 cents a month for dues. This money goes towards the support of the temple. This, if not paid, does not entitle you to the protection that is provided for you.
Islam, let's stop right there. Because this is important. From my experience as a Sheikh of the Moorish Science Temple of America, you see individuals in our communities from all walks of life that have come into the temple seeking aid. And that is what the purpose of the temple is for. But they'll come seeking aid, but they don't never make meetings. They don't pay dues. They don't participate in the uplifting work of the Moorish Science Temple of America. Then they come when they get into a situation when Rome is coming down and bearing down upon them. And they can no longer bear the weight and they're seeking reprieve. Then they come to the doors of the Moorish Science Temple of America. When all else fails and other avenues have not worked for them, they have not found success in those other avenues. And then they hear us Brooklyn Moors dealing with the law. Not only are we members of the Moorish Science Temple of America under the jurisdiction of the Prophet Noble Jew Ali, but also we deal with the law. We don't adhere to unconstitutional precedents, and we support our members who go through any kind of issues, whether it's just personal, counseling type of issues. It could be marital issues. It could be anything, or it could be something more serious. A Moor might have been charged with a crime. They got some type of, heavy financial burden on them that they trying to figure out. We will aid and assist. But according to the laws as laid down by the Prophet Noble Jew Ali, our existence only extends to those who pay their dues. It says, and this is a quote, we're quoting the Prophet Noble Jew Ali. So don't get mad at Sheikh Amir because he's reading it, or Sheikh Muhammad because he's reading it, and Sheikh Amir is bringing it forth. Don't get mad at Grand Sheikh Yusuf Bey because he is following the administration of the Prophet Noble Jew Ali, and he's pointing out that this is what needs to be done. Don't get mad at us. We didn't write this. We weren't even born when it was written. We're just bringing it forth to the Moorish community. So this is not just for our particular temple. This is for the edification of those who want to join the Moorish movement, so that they can know what should be expected according to the Prophet, and not any man living today, or those who are already members of the Moorish Science Temple of America, albeit under different leadership, and want to know what is expected according to the teachings in the laws of the Prophet Noble Jew Ali. Or maybe some membership, or maybe some leaderships in the Moorish Science Temple of America that may have not, or may have glossed over, or haven't read this, or still trying to get themselves off the ground. They could benefit from the administration that the Prophet left behind for us, the administration protocol. Okay? But getting back to the point, this money goes towards the support of the temple. The temple is not just a physical building. More of what the temple is the members that are a part of it. That is the temple. It's the people. And so even though we're not meeting physically at 317 Claremont Avenue in Brooklyn, New York, we are still finding ways to congregate and have temple meetings, albeit through the medium known as Zoom at this point in time. And we're able to disseminate our meetings for those who can't make the Sunday Zoom meetings. We're putting it online through YouTube and other, and whatever platforms that we could share this knowledge with people. But it says this goes to the support of the temple, which are the members. This is not paid, does not entitle you to the protection that is provided for you. So many times people have come to our doors. We might have had them come and they started off and and then they just disappear and they show back up when something bad happens. And then or they are not actual members of the temple. They just came to a meeting or two, and then now something happened and then they came to us. You don't know how many dozens of people over the years that have come with a problem. And me and the sheiks, we would congregate and we will all say the same thing. He just here because he got a problem. We see right through you. And the prophet seen through you in that same spirit in that time. And that's why he wrote this. You're not extended the protections because you're not adhering to the law. You have not paid your dues, your monthly dues. And so you want the benefits of what those dues provide, which are the protections, not just the assistance and labor of the sheiks, but whatever resources can be made available through those protections. The jurisdiction of the prophet itself as a body politic to be able to challenge jurisdiction in court. When you saying I'm not under the 14th Amendment, I'm under the jurisdiction of the Prophet Noble Jew Ali and the executive will of Abraham Lincoln, if you among us. And the support that we will provide, like I put in hours of work preparing, helping Moors get together their legal documents and, helping them, construct their legal arguments for them to defend themselves in court. I'm not an attorney. I don't have the capacity to give legal advice in terms of that particular construct, but I am a constitutional adept and I can speak on the Constitution with some level of authority in terms of my knowledge and expertise. And I do have a background in law, pre-law studies that enables me to be of assistance. And I provide that assistance for members. But if somebody outside of our temple, like I got to take from my life and my time, I don't charge members for this. Nobody's ever came to me with a legal problem or in terms of creating some legal documents or typing something, putting it there. I've never charged a member. I don't charge for that service. Why? Because they are entitled to the protections because they pay their dues. They show up to the meetings. When we call and say we gotta do some missionary work, they're there. I don't want to belabor the point, but that sentence stands out so strongly to me. And from my personal experience, I wanted to share with Moors. Come into the temple with the right spirit, not for what the temple could do for you, but what you can do for the temple. And then the blessings of our father, Prophet Noble Drew Ali, could be extended upon you all. The blessings of Allah, our heavenly Father, could be extended upon all his children that dwelleth within his house. But among us, his house is the temple known as the Moorish Science Temple of America. That's the house that we all dwelleth in. And so you outside of that house, then there's only a limited amount of assistance that we could provide for you because we have to take from other members to give to you, or we have to take from ourselves to give to you. And at the same time, we have the duty to uplift fallen humanity. And you don't want to assist in that duty, but you want assistance. And that's where it becomes problematic. Islam. And so that attitude that we have towards people, it's not because we got a personal gripe against Moors that do this, or we got a personal issue. We just know the spirit of the Prophet, and we know the spirit of Allah and the will of Allah. We recognize that don't dwell in certain people. They just want to be able to, get out of whatever consequences that the current system has in place. But if you're not following the Prophet, then you don't deserve that assistance. What you need to do is cease wearing your turban or fez, give back your card and button, and return back to that state that's about to come down on you. That's what you need to do. Because at least you're only dealing with that karma and not the entire karma that will fall down upon you, trying to use the Prophet to benefit yourself, but you don't want to help him in his great missionary work. I kind of went in kind of hard on that, Moors, but I'm very passionate about that point. Islam, before we continue, actually, let's finish this off real quick, and then I'll open the floor. Islam, Sheikh Muhammad, you could. It says that is provided for you. You can go to the next sentence, and especially if you.
And especially if you are working or in position to work. If you neglect to fulfill the small duty assigned to you, how can you rightfully expect money or the help when you are sick or otherwise disabled? The Prophet, Noble Drew Ali, Islam.
Islam. So going back to the point I brought up earlier, you see the word money used again. This is another. So clearly, I didn't go through this on Fire Tukum. I thought of this demonstration this morning, and then I kind of explained Sheikh Muhammad my vision, and then he was able to kind of piece together some of these excerpts, so that we could have a bill specifically on this. Because again, my Moorish literature and things are not with me at this moment in time, and I appreciate the Sheikh's support in this demonstration. But it wasn't something that was previously prepared. We all have an awareness of this as Sheikhs. We study our literature, but I may not know every word that's used, but I understand all the messages that's conveyed in all the works that the Prophet has written. But we all grow in our understanding. Anyway, getting back, it says, and if you are working, and especially if you are working, or in the position to work. So meaning if you can work, but you not, get you a job and help save your people. If you already working, what's the problem? It's only a small task. I see you Asiatics out there buying stuff. You got your new P5s, you got this, you got that, you got the Con Yeezys on your feet, you got this new car that you done bought, but you can't put a few dollars to the side for some monthly dues. I ain't got it this month, Sheik. You got the Netflix subscription, the Amazon Prime. You got all these things coming off your credit card. Could you imagine if so-called Asiatics, we all got this $1,400 stimulus check? All right, we all gonna take $250. Everybody else still got $1,150. Not that big of a deal. But times that times 40 million and see what we could do. This is administration of finance we're talking about. Cooperative, collective economics. This is what the prophet taught. And if you sheiks out there are not aware of this information, you need to brush up and get your knowledge in this particular area up so that you can properly administer this finance for the benefit of your members. And lastly, before I open the floor, if you neglect to fulfill this small duty assigned you, who assigned you that duty? The Prophet Noble Jew Ali. What authority does he have to assign you that duty? He is a prophet of Allah. He's a prophet of Allah. He assigned you a duty. Every good member has this duty to pay their monthly dues, pay into their emergency fund. Not asking you to break the bank. The prophet ain't asked you to break the bank. He don't want you overcharged. He don't want you broke, destitute, and poor while all these religious people taking your money, getting rich, and not giving you nothing back. That's not what he wanted. He told you what the money's for. Islam, and he says, if you neglect this small duty assigned to you, how can you rightfully expect money or to help when you are sick or otherwise disabled? If you didn't pay into Social Security your whole life, how could you expect enough money to survive off of? People pay into that so that they can claim later on. So that's the whole point of being a good member, making your meetings, paying your dues, being active in all uplifting acts. Because these have a function in the Prophet's grand scheme, his grand master plan to save our nation. And he put it in law and wants that in law enforced in order to save the nation. I know you hear the prophet when you hear I speak because I'm using his words. So I know you hear his words. Now, if you take heed to it or not, that's on you, Muslim. That's on you, more. But if you got the Moorish literature, you know what we're reading is the words of the Prophet Noble Jawali. You know this. And so if you want to be able to expect the services that is supposed to be provided by the temple, that is provided by the temple, that will be created once our people are contributing enough to the movement, we'll have more resources to do more things. But at this point, I want to open the floor. Listen, Sheikh Muhammad got so much information, but I'm opening the floor right now. The Grand Sheikh, he's got the floor, and we're gonna leave it there. Islam, Morris. Islam, Grand Sheikh.
Islam. First, I give praise to Allah, honors to all the divine prophets, honors to the last prophet of the day, entire prophet Noble Drew Ali, honors to Grand Richest dingle-el, Grand dingle-el, Supreme Council, honors to the Moorish flag, honors to the American banner of Islam. This was a very
Islam, Grand Sheikh. Before you start, I didn't want to interrupt you while you was giving your honors, but you sound very muffled, and there's a little bit of static coming on your end. I wanted to make sure whatever you say is clear. Islam.
You hear me now better?
Perfect. Islam.
Islam. This was a great demonstration. It was very needed because as most who've been around me since we started this temple, I became the boogeyman, the big bad wolf, because a lot of the things the most was saying I was enforcing, and Morse had a problem with it.
and it was trial and error because at first when we started, I didn't have a late fee because I didn't enforce that, but Moses was walking in the temple anytime he wanted to. We could be almost finished the meeting and more walk in. So I realized that that was an issue. So, like the more said, we didn't create, but we enforced the late fee. But it was really not to get money; it was for the Moses to come on time. Then Moors would come with any type of clothes on with their fez. So we had to create the dress code, so Moors could come in business attire and look proper with their fez and turban on. But that was also enforced for the children. Moors had a problem with that. They wanted their children to come any type of way. But I come from a paramilitary organization, which was the Nation of Islam, I, that the children as well as the adults, we had a dress code. You know what I'm saying? It was order. So that became issues with Moors. And then um I don't recommend any more to go to court and defend themselves. That's the least thing I recommend the Moors. But if a Moor insists to do it, then me and the mayor we'll get on our job with it. A mayor do the paperwork, we'll do mock trials and everything. I had a Moor that, like Amir said, Amir has 3 children. He works prepare a legal defense for more. Gave We gave them more mock trials. When the more goes to court, he don't do nothing we say, and then tells me that I don't like him. If I don't like you, why would I even have more take off of work, come with you to court, and invest time into preparing the legal defense for you? This stuff like this is crazy. You know what I'm saying? But this is what you go through when you in this position, when people can't understand how can a person who are, I'm not old, and I look younger than what I am in this position. But you have to have structure and law. It was a time when and all the Moors could contest to this, that we had enough dues that we collected that when we had events, I didn't have to ask no Moors for no money. We already had enough money to do events without asking for no money. When our membership was coming, and we had decent amount of guests, and we was able to collect donations and stuff. We was able to function events and didn't even ask for money. Like when our first cookouts, we didn't have to ask for no money because we had money, for the dues and donation that was given. So what the Morris saying is very important. We have to have structure. We have to create these type of ways to create finances. But what you need to create finances? You need people. And if you don't have people, you begin to put a burden on the little people you have. So in a position of being a general, you have to be wise. You can't put a burden on your Moors and be asking for all this type of money, and that it could hurt them. You got to be mindful of the situation, and we can't put the cart before the horse. But I appreciate what the more is demonstrated. But those you've been around, we saw Moors coming to the temple uh, for a day or two and want some type of assistance, or they just you know they pop up and they want something. And like Amir said, we know who you are right away. Then we see it in your eyes. We smell it on you when you walk in the door. We already know. You know what I'm saying? And if a more, like for me, for instance, if I see a more got potential, because in the Brooklyn Moors, we want quality, not quantity. I don't make people sheiks because I don't recommend somebody to be a sheik because they're my best friend, or because they come to the meetings all the time, or because we cool. You know what I'm saying? You have to be study in our basic foundation. And I don't ask for nothing more, nothing less. Know the foundation that we teach, And once you know that and you've been sincere, you have the title faithful, then I will recommend you for those particular titles. It's simple. So if you see me to begin to be on you, I'm preparing you for something. And if you can't take the heat, then I know you ain't ready to be appointed to that position. And it was Moors that was in our temple in the past that I saw potential in them, but when I put the heat on them, they couldn't handle it. They started crying, figuratively. But more on Amir, Sheikh Amir, I appreciate the demonstration. It was needed. You touched in the Sheikh Muhammad touched a lot of aspects. It was a great demonstration. With that, I say peace.
Thank you very much, Grand Sheik. And just kind of add on to what you said, during this COVID pandemic, because we aren't meeting, we haven't been even collecting dues from our members. Nobody has had throughout this entire pandemic. We understand the financial burden. Many people have lost their jobs, and it's a very difficult economic climate at this time. Gas prices rise, all these different things happening, and so we haven't burdened the members to pay their dues. So while we're talking about the monthly dues, at this present moment in time, because we aren't physically meeting, we're not paying rent at our location, we don't have any outstanding expenses except for the Zoom meeting, which I cover, no problem. It's only like $15, a month, whatever. And that's it. There's no expenses for us. Therefore, we don't collect no dues or for the members at this time. And lastly, I'll say this and open the floor. I think we'll have to do a part 2 to get through more of the Prophet's works. But not only have we not collected dues, but my Grand Sheik has been in Moorish science, over 2 decades. All of us sheiks, we've been in this Moorish movement for years, and we've never made a dime off of this. We've never made a penny. We never turned a profit off of this. It was never a goal. And so, although we're talking about finance, we're talking about it from the perspective of the Prophet and the significance of it in terms of not only what we're able to do with the little that we have. We've financed ourselves being in the labor rate parade multiple times. We financed ourselves to be able to, without going to members and saying, we about to do this, can y'all give us some money for it? They already paid their dues. We financed multiple times in the Labor Day parade so we could spread awareness of the Prophet, the Moorish Temple of America, and teaching our people about their nationality and birthrights. We've paid for permits to do demonstrations down at City Hall. No members had to pay for that. Barbecues with people bringing not just the members, but their friends and family. It's not free food. It was through the coffers of the temple of the faithful's finances that they put to the side. We've rented different venues. We bought gifts every year for the kids for Moorish Christmas. This was off the dues. Celebrated the Prophet's birthday and do different events. These are just a few things. I don't want to waste too much more time because I want to give more opportunity to speak before we close out. But these are the things we were able to do with that finance. And we're not a large body of Moors. And if we had more members, we had more finance available, you would be surprised what we would be able to produce with that, because we good-hearted Moors, we have great leadership, and we believe in the teachings of the Prophet Noble Ali. We have race pride. We love our race, and we believe that our condition could be better in America. And so with that, I'm gonna close out the demonstration at this point in time. I like to thank my Sheikh Muhammad, my brother Sheikh Muhammad, for his assistance. He was very instrumental in this demonstration. And I also like to thank the Grand Sheik for culminating some of the concepts and bringing it home and bringing a real life, our experiences and all of that to the table so that we could have a real full, clear understanding of, finance in terms of the views of the Prophet, the Moorish Temple of America, and the administration of our economic prosperity. And with that, I say peace. The floor is open. Anybody could add on, ask questions, comments, concerns, anything of that nature. With that, I say Islam and peace.
Islam, great demonstration, Sheikh. I just wanted to add on in business, wages get taxes, contribution dues and donations don't. Islam.
I'm sorry, brother Jeff. I didn't get that. Thank you for the honors, Mo. What was that you just said? I didn't catch it.
I'm sorry. I said in business, wages get taxed. Dues, donations, and contributions don't. Islam.
Oh yeah, yes, that's a fact. That's a fact. And so the money that you give into the organization, obviously, is is tax free money. So whatever you give to the people, Uncle Sam, or whatever you donate to the temple, Uncle Sam gonna get a piece of that. All right, that's just they already taxed it before you got it, more than likely. And so that all that is just straight to the prophet. You give $10, $10 is to the prophet, $10 is to the temple, $10 is to the movement. And so thank you for that, brother Jeff. That's a very good point. Anyone else? Floor still open.
Islam. Great demonstration. Really, what it all comes down to, like what we always say, you just got to study the prophets, not only the Moorish Quran, the laws, but also the Moorish literature, which you went into today. And when you study this and go over it, none of this stuff should sound crazy to anybody. And studying the prophet's works, all his works, that alone will cut down so much of the confusion in the movement. But again, a great demonstration, Islam.
Islam, thank you, Sheikh. Islam, more floor still open. We're about to close out though, more. So if you're gonna say something, speak now. Forever hold your peace, or at least hold your peace till next Sunday. Islam. Islam, most. Well, I don't like I said. I don't want to waste any further time. You know, like again, once again, I appreciate all my sheiks. I appreciate every last one of you, members and guests, who have come to join us in our Sunday meeting. Hopefully, Brother Jeff will be able to find some time to get that video up soon, and you'll be able to share. Please do check out our YouTube channel, Brooklyn Moors. If you type in Brooklyn Moors, plural, and the word Moorish after that, our channel will pop up. You'll be able to find our latest content as well as go into the archives and get you some heavy degrees in Moorish science. We also have a Instagram page. I believe it's called Brooklyn Moors as well. We have a Facebook page, Moorish Science Club of America 21-3. So please follow us over there and any other platforms that are readily available. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, share our videos, share the content if you appreciate the message. And so now we're gonna close out our meeting as we opened it, and I'm gonna bring Sheikh Muhammad to the floor to close out our meeting properly. Islam.